Okay, we are live. Perfect. Okay. Right. What to discuss today? The Champions League last night. Liverpool lose 2-0 away in Belgrade. I would say that defeat highlights a lot of issues Liverpool have had for a very very long time. It's not just Jurgen Klopp. It's going back to the 90s. We're trying to find consistent defending and goalkeeping. Just highlights lots of old issues there. Tottenham squeak a win against PSV. Their Champions League hopes do hang on the next few games. They have to win basically every game they play now. So they're leaving it a little bit late. So that's the Champions League side of things done. They do rely on results going their way as well with Barcelona and Inter. So that could prove interesting. In the rugby league side of things, Jared Hayne is not going to re-sign for Parramatta for 2019. So where does he end up? That's really really interesting. And what is the future for Jared Hayne in rugby league? Because he says he wants to play till he's 34, 35. He feels he's got another good 4 or 5 years left in him. Obviously, his return to the NRL hasn't been all rosy. There's been issues with Gold Coast when he played there, and it didn't work out for Parramatta second time round, which is a shame. But bearing in mind they did get him below market value, they've got their market signings, their big name signings done. There's a salary cap in the NRL. Does that mean he comes to the Super League to play? And would he fit English rugby league, and would he fit a Super League side, and how would he adapt to the English game, being a different style? Because I think he's lost a step, and a lot of English players do, especially in the back three, are a lot quicker than him. So he could be, left flat-footed and exposed in defence. Could he adapt his game for the English game? So George Illawarra has been named as one of the teams that are very, very interested, possibly in getting his signature, and he could go to. It's still in the NRL. It's still in New South Wales. So that could be an option for Jared Hayne over the next year or so to look at. Then, of course, we've got George Burgess getting suspended for this eye gouge in the third test. And I'm surprised it wasn't picked up actually during the game. And this is where I highlight the lack of consistency of rules across NRL, Super League, and international level. There's 3 different rule sets for rugby league, and I think that's something that rugby league needs to address internationally across the board. Where they get the Super League, they get the NRL, they get the international game, and the various other, rugby league, amateur, semi-pro, and professional leagues from France, for example, around the table. And they work out a refereeing format and an officiating format, a rule format going forward. Because if that was in the NRL and with the 2-ref system, that gets picked up. You'll have the second referee by the tackle area looking at the tackle area. You'll have the other referee on 10 metres away, keeping the players on side. That will get pulled up in the NRL. And George Burgess and Martin Zelezniak are NRL players. He got away with one on the field. He should have possibly got a 10-minute for that, possibly being put on report straight away. He wasn't. Had to wait half a week for the outcome of disciplinary proceedings. I'm surprised also there wasn't more disciplinary proceedings to come out of that game in the second test, with a couple of late hits and, of course, the brawl 54 minutes. So, again, there is issues to be highlighted with international rugby league and rugby league across the board, with varying rule sets for, different leagues and international level. It poses a selection headache for Wayne Bennett for the third test. I know we won the series, and I know it'll be a chance to blood some new players or get some other players in the squad some game time. But that is a change that I think he would rather have not had to have made. I think it's a selection headache he doesn't need, with Darryl Clark being injured as well, which means he's already missing 1 forward from the squad with injury. He's now missing 2 forwards from the squad with suspension and injury now. So we'll see who he names to come in to replace George Burgess in the squad and starting squad and on the interchange bench. Burgess has played well alongside his brother Tom. They've stepped up in the absence of Sam, their brother. They've both played really well in the series so far. They've had some important carries, defensive plays. They've done their role very, very well. They've broken the game line. So Wayne Bennett's going to have to be scratching his head and working out who he brings into the squad, considering there are a lot of players already out with injury or suspension or being rested. So it's not a full-strength England team. New Zealand, I think, will now look at the submission and target possibly discipline in the third test, and probably target certain players to see if they can test their temperament. So it could be a very feisty third test. New Zealand don't want to go away empty-handed with nothing from this series. They will want to put a marker down. It's going to be interesting to see what Wayne Bennett does in the discipline side of it, and what kind of meetings he will have with his players, because he's the type of coach that takes a dim view on avoidable penalties and avoidable suspensions. Very dim view. And discipline has been an issue for the England national side for a while. Too many penalties in the World Cup, too much ill discipline during the World Cup last year. They have shown moments both in the first and second tests where avoidable penalties. So this is a ongoing issue with the national side, and I think Wayne Bennett needs to try and work out why they're giving away so much so many penalties and so much ball to the opposition. On the New Zealand side, I'm surprised none of their players were put on report either. So it wasn't the best refereeing display, I felt, when it came to some of the issues of late tackles and late hits and gouging and things like that. There were a couple other incidents that I think could have been looked at and put on report, but weren't. Rugby union, obviously, we're now in the international window. The test matches that took place last weekend, those weren't full strength squads because it was outside the test window. So some players weren't released by their clubs to play. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in these test matches over November. It's a good marker to see where teams are with the World Cup next year in Japan. There's a lot of new faces getting into squads. There's players who've retired over the last year or so and stepped away from the game. There's a lot of players out injured at the moment. There's a big debate about how many games per season players are allowed to play. Rules are being brought in place to reduce the workload on players. So it's going to be interesting to see, how the games are played, what the results are, what teams have good autumns and what teams have bad autumns, what new faces are going to be blooded and given game time, because we've got to look at next year. And the big talking point is Cipriani's omission from the England squad. So that's still rumbling on, the Cipriani omission. It's a big loss for England. Big loss for England, I feel, because he brings something else to the game. It's another option at 10 or 12. It's another option to have kicking-wise, playmaking-wise. But there are obviously clearly other issues surrounding Cipriani. Is it locker room? Is it in the locker room? Is it in the dressing room? Is it in the training field? Is it off-field discipline? Because on the field he's played very, very well this season and the last couple of seasons. But I think his off-field issues and possibly what happens in that dressing room on the training pitch. There could be a clash of personalities there. Is that too much player power from some of the senior England players who don't get on with Cipriani? Is Eddie Jones possibly the right guy to lead England to the World Cup, considering the form hasn't been great and they've been a bit shaky and they struggled to beat an understrength Springbok side last weekend? So that's a debating point to look at. But I would say this: their poor Six Nations performance. If you're looking towards a World Cup, you want to get the bad form out of the way and fix the issues now rather than in the Six Nations in February, March time. You want to get your work your issues out earlier in the cycle than right near the end. You want to start getting the team to improve and peak during the World Cup. So it's one of these. It's a balancing act. Obviously, England want to get out of the group stage this year. They want to revenge 2015, which was a farce of a World Cup. And I think England, I don't know where they are. I think quarterfinals is what they're probably going to end up getting in Japan. I don't see them getting past the quarterfinals. I'm not sure. I think Ireland are the best bet for a European winner in the Northern Hemisphere. I think Ireland are the best bet. They've proven they can beat the All Blacks. They look like the best bet going forward for a Northern Hemisphere win. The French are too unpredictable. Wales and Scotland, admittedly, they weren't full strength sides at the weekend. What can they bring to the table? Italy don't look great. Again, all these test matches that took place last weekend outside the test window. So we'll see with full strength squads what both the northern and southern hemisphere sides can do over the next 3-4 weeks. The World Rugby needs to look at this test window rule they have in place. If you want to keep playing all these test matches, you've got to look at and schedule them. You've got to look at the test window rules and see if they need updating, tweaking, changing. You don't see this problem in football. You don't see this problem in cricket. You don't really see this problem in rugby league because there's less tests, but you don't see it. Internationally, you do see some issues with ice hockey when it comes to the World Championships and Stanley Cup playoffs, and not all the players being available to play. But international level sport and club level sport, it's a fine balancing out. The club country debate does go back a fair way. It varies from sport to sport, but the club country debate on eligibility of players to play test level. So it's nothing new. So that's an interesting point to look at. I've also been asked a lot about the Cricket World Cup and who I think is going to win next year. Now, looking at the conditions we have this summer and looking at how the conditions have been so changeable now and the rapid change in conditions that we've had over the last month and a half, it was really warm yesterday. We're in November and it was 16 degrees. So the British climate is really weird right now. This summer was one of the hottest we've ever had, with a 40-day heat wave or something. It was insane. We had a drought, and September was reasonably warm as well. So this could be interesting to see how that affects the conditions at the World Cup. I don't think there's an outstanding side that's going to win. I think when it comes to a tournament like this, every side ups their game. There's a lot of players coming through right now for a variety of countries who look really interesting. English wickets in the height of summer. It depends on if we have another similar heat wave to what we had this summer. If we have a long dry spell, that will change how the wicket behaves. August wasn't as dry. There was more rain, more changeable conditions, and the Indians didn't adapt well to the change of conditions from June, July to August, which is why England won the Test series. At the end of the day, was the adaptation to playing conditions. We'll see what happens with the Cricket World Cup. We really, really will. It's going to be interesting. I think England will play well because they're the host nation. I do believe the subcontinental teams from Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh will also be tough to play against. I think Australia are a bit wounded right now with what's gone on with Cricket Australia and the ball tampering scandal and the review into the practices of the national side in Australia. New Zealand have always got a good side. West Indies always play well in the short formats of the game. Ireland are now a test nation, so they've had a boost over the last 18 months. Look for them to try and put a performance in as well. South Africa are always decent at all forms of cricket. So it's going to be a very, very open tournament. It's going to be a very, very tightly contested tournament. It will be interesting to see how it all plays out. I will have a better idea closer to the time what teams are hitting form before they go into the tournament. So that'll be interesting to look at next year. And we'll have to, it'll be better to assess where the nations are at closer to the tournament. We've got a few test series to get out of the way, and one day in T20 series to get out of the way before we get to the World Cup yet. There's a lot of cricket to be played. So that's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. It really will. It is interesting. It is interesting seeing where things are at. Now, the third test for England New Zealand in the Rugby League is being played at Headingley. Crowd numbers have been criticised so far in the way there's the choice of stadium so far and the marketing side of Rugby League. With the weather changing as it is, and I'm looking out my window here, and it's hammered down with rain overnight. It's been very, very wet and windy this morning. Now, I'm in the south of England. Now, Leeds is in the north of England, but the conditions are pretty similar. I can see the weather having more of an effect in the third test. The Headingley pitch isn't as good as the KC Stadium and Anfield, so it could be a heavier pitch. Handling is going to be tested. I think the players are going to feel it more. So physicality is going to be important, and balancing out, being your energy levels and trying to keep some in reserve. Interchange, how they're going to use the interchange bench again. It's going to be really, really interesting, because if the weather conditions are looking like they are going to look like, it's going to be a very, very tough test match physically. because of the conditions. Also, as I said, with the suspension to George Burgess, gives a selection headache to Wayne Bennett because Darryl Clark's injured. That's 2 forwards down. He would with also Sean O'Loughlin as well, so that's 3 forwards down. So he's got to look at trying to get, finding and rotating his squad and getting 3 fresh faces in there. So that's going to be a concern for Wayne Bennett, because I think England do want to win this third test and whitewash the Kiwis. I think the Kiwis obviously will come back with physicality, but they've got to, I don't know, pace themselves in the game. I think the Kiwis, I think they blew themselves out in both test matches. I think they deserved to win the first test. England were very lucky, but in the second test, New Zealand fell apart in the second half, and it was very obvious they fell apart. Okay, no, I'm not promoting your crap. It's spamming, so go away. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the third test. Sean Johnson, some of his kicking in the second test was not as good as it could have been, and that is a weakness in his game at times. He can be brilliant with the running the ball or kicking the ball, and sometimes his kick can be so inaccurate. It's easy to defend. And they didn't test Makinson and Lomax, the shorter wing, or McGilvery on the high ball. Ball was coming up. They had plenty of time, not enough pressure on the receiver. The kick chase wasn't always great. They had a lot of room to get going, and even when the kick chase was there, they weren't necessarily competing in the air and putting them under pressure in the air, so they were able to catch the ball, field the ball, and get to ground quickly to avoid being pushed into touch or over the dead ball line. One thing I have noticed, though, is England's goal kicking isn't good enough. Jake Connor, will he still be the kicker for the third test, or will that be Tompkins or another player? Goal kicking has been an issue. That could prove crucial in a World Cup or against Australia or against another test side. Goal kicking, big highlighted issue there. And it'd be interesting to see what Wayne Bennett does in the goal kicking side of things and how he tries to improve that. Jake Connor did not have a good game with the boot kicking a goal. He only got 1 out of 5 kicks. Was replaced by Tompkins. He's missed a lot of kicks in this series goal, and they could have proved crucial in both test matches. So that's something to keep an eye on and look at, is England's goal kicking in the third test against New Zealand, because it just was not up to scratch. Especially in the second test, really, that was a real weakness highlighted. Jake Connor with the ball in hand, brilliant. He links well with Makinson, links well with Lomax. So that left-hand side attack is flowing. It's the kicking at goal. So yeah, that's the rugby league. I've done my pre-match review on that. I did that earlier in the week because obviously I felt that it was better to give it a week, do the pre-match review, and look forward to this test at the weekend. Also, I'll be at the Bracknell Bees Streatham Redhawks game on Saturday. That's looking to be a good game. With all the issues with British ice hockey at the moment, with teams having to crowdfund to survive, and the rink issues with Basingstoke and Victor's money issues, and Milton Keynes, are they going to be able to, are they going to be in the Elite League next season or come back down? There are all calls to reinstate or bring back the EPIHL, the old second tier. There are calls to reform or in some way the English Premier League ice hockey. Invictus struggles highlight that. I think Milton Keynes, have taken a step too far financially into the Elite League. Guildford are doing fine. Milton Keynes are not. They're just not, as they are the worst team. They're not competitive enough in the Elite League. So again, there are calls to bring back the EPIHL, reform it. We're not sure what's going to happen with the Hull Pirates, whether they're going to go to the Elite League or not. They've had meetings with Elite League management about possibly becoming an expansion team for the Elite League and moving up a level. But again, they've only been a team for 4 or 5 years. For most of their existence, they haven't been very good until recently. So they've had, I think they actually have a losing record overall. But they've lost one of their goaltenders to another European league. He's asked for a release. The coach has been very, very critical of the players he has, even though he was the guy who signed these players. So that raises questions if he's the right guy to coach and if they've got the right locker room chemistry at Hull. Peterborough and Bracknell obviously playing very, very well. Swindon playing very, very well. They were former EPIHL sides. Please stop spamming my channel, mate. You're going to get blocked every time you spam. I'm not going to promote your channel, mate. Stop doing it. Plain and simple. Try twice now. You're annoying me. Go away. I hate spammers. That's all that guy's done is spam. Hasn't said, okay, what's your channel about? I found your channel. It goes, promote my channel, please. No. So bye bye. I'm not an advertising board. You want to have a debate about sports? So be it. If I feel that yes, you are worth promoting, you got to get into a discussion first. I just demand that I promote your channel. It doesn't work that way. Um, Point of etiquette on the chat. Don't ask me to promote your channel without actually getting into the debate first about the channels or my channel's all about. So unless you're going to join the sports debate, go away. Hello there. What is it? Whaley, 357. Nice to see you. What questions do you have? Because I'll be very interested to answer any of your sports questions that you may have and debate sports with you. So feel free to whack your question in, and we'll see if I can answer it. It's the best way to go here, and see what sports you're interested in and what views you have on sport as well, because that'll be interesting. So while I wait for your question, I'm going to go back to the point I was on. So get your questions in, and I'll just continue talking what I was talking about, and then we'll see what questions come up. So yeah, British ice hockey funding side of it and structural side of it is a problem. Now the big issue at the moment is Basingstoke and what's happening with their rink. Now Planet Ice have decided to step away from operating the Basingstoke rink. It just basically they've cut tail and run. They don't want to own up to the issues of the fact they haven't maintained it properly. So New Rivers is another company to come in. They've said there is going to be a complete refurb of the rink internally. That may take several years. A temporary rink solution has to be found. There is a meeting on the 14th of November to assess what they can do in a temporary rink and the plan going forward. So you're not really into sports and you just got bored. Okay, maybe I can educate you on sport. So why are you not really into sports? Why? What puts you off? What puts you off sport? That's a question I can ask you. What puts you off sport? Why do you not really get into it? Are you more of a video gamer? That could be interesting. I mean, what puts you off involving yourself with sport, be it amateur or pro? That's what I'm interested in getting at here, because you've obviously come onto the live stream. You basically said sports isn't really your thing, and this is a sports channel. So I'm interested to know why you don't like sport, or what really puts you off sport, and that's something interesting to look at, of why people are feeling disenfranchised with sport and not really feeling engaged with it. That's a crucial question that professional sports need to ask: why certain people, certain societal groups aren't necessarily engaged. Sports engagement with communities is vital. It's a vital community tool. It's a vital social tool. Right. It doesn't matter if you can't catch anything and if you're socially awkward. I had issues with my coordination playing rugby, and I worked at it. I think you shouldn't worry about being socially awkward or not necessarily being able-bodied. You can still compete. You can still do exercise. You can still go down as a fan and enjoy the fan experience. A lot of sports teams and leagues do cater for people like you who may not be so confident socially, or may not be able-bodied to compete, but may want to be involved in the sports team, be it supporting or administrating and things like that. So it's not always doom and gloom. I do think certain sports aren't suited for everyone, and not everyone likes all sport. That's completely fine, and I appreciate some people do have social anxiety and other issues, be it feeling, I don't know, not able to fully get into sport. And if you have an illness, it's not necessarily the end of the world. I think that shouldn't necessarily hold you back. It doesn't mean you can't go down and support your local sports teams, or support a sport, or get involved in sport by watching as a fan. I think that's what I've really enjoyed over the last 7 years since I dislocated. Last played rugby when I had a severe ankle injury and I couldn't play anymore. I've also had a severe shoulder injury, so I can't play rugby anymore. So I completely understand what it's like not to be able to fully get involved in sport. It's not to say I can't still like enjoying watching it and having an understanding of it. It's not the end of the world. It's interesting to note that because you feel, because of your social anxiety or your bad eyesight, you feel you can't be involved, and you still can. There is nothing wrong with having those barriers in place, because when you can still be involved in some way, and then the best way is just to find your your local sports team and go and watch a game and be involved as a supporter, because you do get a lot back from it. You do meet a lot of cool people. Um, I've made a lot of friends through being a sports fan and going to games and meeting opposition fans and home fans of the same team and getting to know them as well. So it's not the end of the world. I think sport does do a lot of outreach programs into the community. So wherever you live in the world, check them out. Check out what your local sports team is doing for social outreach, community programs, and get involved. It's not all doom and gloom. I know some people do have an issue with getting involved socially or getting involved in the community. You shouldn't put your bad eyesight or your social anxiety and let that hold you back. You should try and obviously overcome those issues and feel free to get involved, because there is a lot that professional sport does give. And I am very critical of how much these sportsmen are paid and some of their antics off the field and some of the bad press that some sports get for whatever reason. It, but I wouldn't say all sportsmen are bad. We've seen obviously with the NFL and linking up with Fortnite. Really interesting what they've done there. They've allowed all the NFL kits to be downloaded as player skins. So they've decided to do some PR kind of marketing and get involved with the video game side that isn't an EA Sports game. So that's really, really interesting. How the NFL has decided to go down this route with technically esports and video gaming to sell its product to younger fans. It's really interesting how they've done that, and I wouldn't be surprised if down the line more professional sports and leagues decide to go down this route to promote themselves and make money, because the NFL will get revenue out of this. And with player wages going up year on year on year, I can see more individual teams, leagues, sports going down this route on non-sports based video games, because obviously you've got all these sports franchises that EA Sports and 2K have. I can see more sports stepping away from their video game franchise and going into selling their licensing for another video game to make revenue. Every time that game is sold, every time an expansion pack is sold, every time any merchandise is sold, they will make some revenue because they put their merchandising in there, their logo in there, their image rights in there, and they make money. So that's another revenue stream that sports is looking at, and I think the NFL is leading the way. Well, I do have a lot of criticisms of the NFL, but they're leading the way in that sense that they are targeting the younger, the video game market, the modern youth, what they're interested in, which is video games. And Fortnite is one of the biggest games right now, and so they've got their NFL logo in there. They've got the NFL teams in there, which are franchise, which they have the rights to. They can make money out of it. Every time an online Fortnite sale is made, the NFL will now get money. And it's a very lucrative revenue stream. Online gaming is an exceptionally lucrative revenue stream, and I can see the NFL making a lot of money out of this, which will then be distributed to the teams, and that will pay some of the players' wages, because ticket prices is a big talking point, and cost, which is another reason we've pushed a lot of people off, is cost. Some sports are a lot cheaper than you think, and some sports are more expensive than you think to get involved in and watch. And it would be really interesting to see, how much money the NFL will make out of this partnership with Epic Games. That's going to be really interesting to see. And if you are into video games, this is a way possibly to get into sport without feeling so socially awkward and not allowing any disability to get in your way of wanting to be involved. The NFL have really got in there quick. Other sports leagues have been critical of the amount of time their athletes are playing video games when they should be focusing on training, fitness, diet, practice. The NHL has come out and basically said, we're a bit concerned about the amount of time you're playing video games when you should be focusing on your fitness. And a few players have come under criticism for being not very fit this season, having team United's playing Fortnite or on GTA or Red Dead Redemption. A fair few players have fallen foul of their coaches for not being match ready because they're spending too much time on video games. But it's the way society is at the moment. A lot of young people are obviously into video gaming, but it's also very, very lucrative, and it's a way of sports having another way to make money, and it's another way to get fans as well if you think outside the box like this, and get new fans on board by advertising yourself via a video game. Is pretty interesting stuff. If you're not really into sport, I do have another channel which deals in video game reviews, film reviews, social events, history, that kind of stuff. It's called the History Buff, and it is in my liked channel list. It's my other channel, so if you want to check that out, feel free to do so as well. It may be more up your street if you're not really into sport. So that's something else you could check out. But yeah, right. So we've covered a lot of things already in the half hour we've been going, and there's a lot of questions being asked. And I've covered a lot of topics while obviously people are watching and getting their questions ready. The NFL's decision, however, to go down linking with Fortnite is really interesting, because a lot of people who come on my live streams ask about esports and things like Twitch and online gaming. It's really interesting how many people are bringing up esports and asking about the future of esports. Esports has grown massively. Online gaming has grown massively. You've got Counter-Strike was one of the first major online games to have that kind of local area network multiplayer version. You've got Call of Duty, you've had Battlefield, you've had Gears of War. There's a lot of these multiplayer games that are played at esports conventions and esports tournaments. The amount of money in esports is growing year on year. The amount of people taking part, really growing year on year. Esports is a thing that needs to be taken seriously by mainstream media, and now the NFL has noticed Fortnite and has decided to get involved with Epic Games and do a partnership. Yeah, there's the sport, professional sport and esports link is there. So thank you for popping in. I hope you've enjoyed it and you've got something out of asking the questions. And I hope to see you again and to see your questions again. And hopefully you do get into sport and you enjoy it. And sport should be inclusive for everyone. So I hope you find what you're looking for and everything goes well. So back on the esports agenda, it is interesting on the esports agenda. I can see more pro sports going down this route to get into the video game market with non-sports video games to promote their product with having characters with the sports jersey or having their logo in the game or whatever it may be. And I think the NFL have got a PR masterstroke here. Whoever's Roger Goodell's put in charge of marketing and PR at the NFL is getting a raise today. I can definitely tell you that. Because PR-wise, it's a genius move, absolutely genius move by the NFL. Roger Goodell's going to be very, very happy with whoever's in charge of marketing. And this is another issue that sports have is how they market themselves. TV rights deals of, oh dear, it's hammering down with rain. Feel sorry for anyone playing football tonight in the Champions League. It is belting it down. Oof. But talking about sports marketing, that's something where some sports have got it right and some sports have got it wrong over the years. We've seen some sports have real PR nightmares when an individual club or an individual athlete or an individual coach or someone in the media has basically thrown a clanger in the works by having a moment, a bad moment or a bad bit of press coverage or a scandal coming out. And some sports seem to have a lot of scandal around them. We've seen, obviously, in the last week, Der Spiegel, this German publication, which is very, very good at undercover reporting and unearthing corruption and that and dodgy goings on. Der Spiegel is very, very good at actually seeking out the truth. The financial fair play rules that UEFA put in place, there is a debate whether they've helped the game or hindered the game, whether they're classed as protectionism for the old school clubs that have been very, very successful to prevent the newer successful clubs from gaining that success and that history. But two clubs have been in breach of it that seem to have got away with financial fair play breaches, and that's Man City and PSG. Um, Very, very interesting. What's come out so far? If the Spiegel source is correct, that is hugely damaging for both UEFA and the French league and the English leagues. In going forward, it's hugely damaging if this is true. La Liga is now trying to push for further sanctions, but La Liga has been very well protected by financial fair play. It's protected the Spanish clubs exceptionally well, considering that they get state funding at times. Both Real Madrid and Barcelona and a host of other Spanish clubs have had state funding go their way, and very, very interesting with these allegations by in Der Spiegel about UEFA assisting some clubs in getting around the financial fair play rules that UEFA itself put in place. It does show that the amount of money in the game is a lot, and it's not evenly distributed amongst all levels of the sport. Teams at lower levels are struggling to survive. Not every club has, a multi-trillionaire Abu Dhabi prince owning them. A lot of clubs are scraping the barrel financially, and you just got to look at the English game or the Scottish game with the have and have not gap getting bigger, and the amount of clubs in financial difficulty is alarmingly high. And is the current financial model that football has in Europe financially sustainable long term? That's something to question. Is the current financial model that the Premier League in England has, and the Scottish Premier League has, and La Liga and Serie A and the Bundesliga and La Liga, is the current financial model currently sustainable? Because the amount of clubs that have severe cash flow problems is dangerously high. So we'll have to see, what happens going forward. And finances in football are regularly questioned about, are they sustainable? Can they be sustained long term? How many more clubs have to go into administration before something is done to protect them and assist them? Because what we're seeing at the moment is the amount of clubs that are financially against the wall is alarmingly high. And if financial fair play has been breached in such a way and has been aided in such a way, it makes a mockery of the rules put in place to keep costs down and to make clubs self-sufficient, which is, I believe, that was the premise that financial fair play was all about. But the rules are regularly flouted by a variety of clubs, regularly flouted. And it is interesting where we're at. But if these allegations are true, it does damage the relationship between fans and the governance of the game and clubs having a disconnect. We're already seeing issues with La Liga wanting to play games in America and the players and fans not being on board. And if you can't get the players on board, let alone the fans, you've got a problem. And I'm not 100% certain what the MLS would feel about having regular season games from a European league on American soil. What that would do. Hey Rob, haven't seen you for a while, girl buddy. How you doing? Haven't seen you for months, mate. You've missed a great start of the season by the Bees, man. What do I think on the Ottawa Senators players? Wow. I think you can definitely tell. I know you're a Senators fan. I know you're a Sens fan. And a former taxi driver as well. So this is really interesting how you make your view on this. Honestly, since Eric Carlson got injured and played that playoff conference final on one leg, the Senators haven't been right. I think they didn't. I know Eric Carlson, wanted to win, and he was a team guy. Even when he was hurt, he was putting a shift in. But I honestly, I think when he injured his ankle and his foot, and he wasn't fully right, they didn't rest him enough for the playoffs. He then played through the playoffs basically on half a leg. Then I think they rushed him back from injury last season. I don't think he was fully fit for most of the season. Obviously, but then the Carlson Hoffman incident with Hoffman's partner, harassing Carlson's wife about a very personal issue, and then Eric Carlson requesting a trade and refusing to sign again. He goes to San Jose. They get DeMello and other players back, and some of those players that come from San Jose are some of the the players in um, in the taxi. I think Duchesne, all the players that were in the taxi are players that have recently joined the side in the last couple of years. Um, so it's interesting. Well, yeah, but the problem is, I think, with the Senators is all those players in that taxi are not long term players with the team. They've all been added to the team in the last 2 years. So they're not part of the original group that got to that conference final or got into the playoffs in seasons past. They're all new additions to the team under Guy Boucher. Um, but 7 players, that's nearly half the roster is basically in a taxi slagging off the assistant coach. There is clearly issues with Ottawa. They are in a rebuild, so they're not going to be winning the Stanley Cup anytime soon. They're not the best team in the East, clearly. Um, Losing Carlson and losing Hoffman as well was, I think, damaging. The whole incident was badly handled by Pierre Dorian as GM. I think Guy Boucher's been undermined by his players. There's clearly an unhappy dressing room. It's a toxic atmosphere. But at the same time, I think while they're laughing and joking about it, I think they are having a serious conversation about the state of their team. These are players having basically an impromptu meeting in the back of a taxi. I think, um, I the Duchesne is yet unsigned, so we don't know what's going to happen with Duchesne when it comes to signing an extension. The amount of effort that was put into getting him from Colorado that basically took 2 years to get that deal done, which unstable, was a three-way trade. Kyle Torres ends up in Nashville. I don't know who went to Colorado in the end. I think Andrew Hammond was one of the pieces that went to Colorado, and he's ended up elsewhere. And they got Duchesne out of Colorado, but the amount of time and effort they put in getting that three-way trade in place, it hasn't really worked because Duchesne has been hit and miss. He's been good some games, bad others. It took him a while to get his scoring boots on, and I don't honestly know, what's going on there. But the owner is an issue. Eugene Melnick is not a popular owner. Um, Very hands-on, interfering owner, not popular with the fans. Fans are staying away. Guy Boucher, I don't think he's a bad coach, but I think he's been undermined, by the players. But there is clearly an issue with defence. There's clearly an issue with the penalty kill, with the power play. The special teams aren't good enough, and I think Pierre Dorian, mate, I don't know what he's doing there, giving away high draft picks. I do not understand that. Well, I think the draft system needs looking at and adjusting. Unless you are a contending team and it's at the draft and it's at the trade deadline, I do not understand why they were giving away draft picks. And Colorado, look what Colorado are now compared to Ottawa. Look how they did last season, getting in the playoffs by surprise. Look how badly Ottawa were. But no, the situation that with the Senators is not good. I would be surprised if Guy Boucher is there at the end of the season. I think if he's been undermined so blatantly by his players, it always depends on how their form goes over, I think, the next month. If they have a real bad run, because when they were in Arizona, they lost that, to Vegas. They lost to Arizona badly, and I don't know long term if Guy Boucher wants to stay in such a toxic environment either. I really don't. I think the environment is toxic. I think the players know the environment's toxic. The Hoffman Carlson aftermath is still ongoing because I think that's divided that dressing room. Um, I think they've got some players on bad contracts. They're relying a lot on they're relying a lot on younger players. And yes, you may have beaten New Jersey last night, but the run they've been on hasn't been great. And winning one game against another team that's been on a poor run is not necessarily a good marker. If you beat a team like Nashville, that's different because they're a team that is on form. New Jersey started the season well, had a sticky patch, won against the Penguins, come in and lose against you. I don't think one victory or one result is going to change the long term issues with the team. You have to judge them on if they beat teams above them in the standings who are superior on good form. If they go in, and I'm a Winnipeg fan, right? So let's say they go in and the Jets, who've had a decent start to the season, not perfect, but a decent start to the season, and they go in to Winnipeg, where Winnipeg are very, very good at home, and beat them on a similar scoreline. Let's say Winnipeg have had a 3-4 game winning streak and they beat them. That is a difference. They don't. They're not consistent enough. They've had some real hidings this season so far, like 9-2. I mean, come on, against Buffalo. That Buffalo haven't scored that many goals in a decade. To concede 9 to Buffalo is not good enough on a team that has been struggling for years. Buffalo come in, put 9 past you. It's just you're scratching your head, going how. I do think there is definite issues with ownership. There's definite issues with location of the arena in Ottawa. I think it's in the wrong end of Ottawa. It's in the arse end. I do think there are some good young there are some good young players coming through. I will happily say that there are some very, very good young players coming through. Brady Tkachuk has been very, very, very good as pickup. He's got a bit more scoring upside than his brother Matt. He can fight, which is something that I think we're lacking, is that spiteful side, I suppose, a little bit. Borwiecki, if he's an experienced guy in the blue line or experienced guy in that locker room who's been there long term, that's a worry. That's a real concern going forward down the line. There are a lot of players injured, which doesn't help. But it is a concern that all the players in that taxi cab were more recent additions in the last 2 seasons. That's a concern, that the new players coming in have this outlook on what's going on, coaching wise, ownership wise, in the locker room. There's clearly a division in the locker room. There's not a united locker room there, which 2 years ago there was, when they raided around Craig Anderson. I'm trying to work out which players who, because it's very, very dark. We know that Chabot is in the front seat. We know that Duchesne's behind the driver. I'm trying to work out. I've seen the whole video. It's hilarious. I find it really, really funny. Does this happen more often than we realise? Probably. Players regularly can criticise and have a debate about how they're doing. Some players will go, right, we are playing shit. We're not playing well. We're not good enough. They did have a players meeting before the New Jersey Devils game, an impromptu players meeting. I don't know what happens long term. I don't think they can afford to discipline them. They can't afford to trade them out. But if Duchesne is saying sign me long term, I think he's saying trade me, please. I think Matt Duchesne will not be long as an Ottawa Senator. I think he's going to leave as well. But it makes you wonder why Colorado didn't want to keep him. So it says something about the player's temperament as well. If he's starting to become a leader in that dressing room and he's a disruptive influence, you can see why the Avalanche were willing to trade him out. But we'll have to see what happens long term. We'll have to see how it was formed, how it goes over the next month, leading into December and the Thanksgiving games. We'll have to see, what form Ottawa carry forward. If they can win a couple of games in a row, then that New Jersey game is a spark. It's a starting point. But if they then go on and lose and have in different form, then who knows? New Jersey aren't on good form at the moment, so that was one result. But if Ottawa can get a couple of results strung together, that could be different. But some of the defeats Ottawa have had have been hammerings. The game against Buffalo, I've watched parts of it. They weren't even trying. It wasn't if they were just being outplayed. They weren't putting any effort in. They weren't even trying. You could see that there was no effort there. They were. I get that you're 6-6-3, but you have to look at the Buffalo game when they lose 9-2. That is a bad record at this stage of the season. If you're technically artificially 500, but in reality below 500, that's not good. You're technically 6-9. You've just picked up 3 points in overtime or shootouts. In reality, you are 6-9. This is where the artificial 500 debate comes in. But The goals against is terrifying. That defence is not good enough. The penalty kill is non-existent. They're one of the worst in the league. The power play is not good enough either. They're not getting enough goals. But if you just have to rewatch the Buffalo game when they lose 9-2, there is no effort being put in. Absolutely none there. And this Buffalo side is good. They're doing better than people expected. But to lose 9-2 to a side that's been basically a bottom feeder for a decade says there's far bigger issues in Ottawa than there could be. But that 9-2 defeat, you have to look at that and see the lack of effort. And they may win games and they might have a 6-6-3. But some of those defeats, the effort has been severely lacking. I don't care. I mean, as a fan, I know my team is not going to win every game. I know when I go to the Bracknell Bees and watch them play, I know they're not going to win every game. I know when I watch the Jets online, I know we're not going to win every game. But it's the effort that I think means something. If you go down fighting, I'm happy with that. If you just go, we're not going to try. We're already 3-0 down. Let's not bother. It does worry me. But even with players out, the players need to step up and put their hand up and go, we're going to put an effort in. We've lost a couple of games, 2 regular seasons so far. But because we're not in the Autumn Cup, we've played more games than other teams in the league, but we are comfortably top. The Bracknell Bees are doing well. Obviously, new logo, bit of rebranding. The rink's having some upgrades. We've now got 3 imports on the roster. We're rotating 3 imports at the moment. I think one's a short-term injury cover, but we have got 3 imports on rotation. So financially, we're more stable. Because we finished 5th in the league, we didn't finish in the top 4. The top 4 of each division play in the Autumn Cup, so that's why it was league finishing position. That's solely it, league finishing position. That's why. But I think it's doing us a favour long term, not having to play those cup games. Less chance of getting injuries, less fixture congestion, more nights off, more weekends with just one game where you can just play your games. We've only lost 2 league games so far, so we are playing well. We've actually had shutouts this season, so everything's improved from top to bottom. Milton as backup has got shutouts now, so his confidence has improved and he's improved. Dean Skins, he's had a few wobbly games where he's conceding goals I think he would want back, but again, he's played well as well. It's good to see them really, really, flowing well. The issue with the league, and I'm not sure if you watched all my videos lately, is Basingstoke's rink issue has deteriorated to the point where they're not even sure they can complete the season. Invicta had to crowdfund over the weekend to get the cash injection short term, just to, in the short term, survive, because there were concerns they wouldn't be able to not necessarily complete the season, but exist next year. There are still issues in place. Invicta need to find a long-term financial solution if they can meet the running costs for next year. Basingstoke, we don't know they're going to have a rink to play on next year. So that's what's happening in the National League. Hull, we're not sure if they're going to go to the Elite League or if they're going to stay. We're not sure about Hull's position. I'm just going to check something quickly on the old internet just to double check something. But yeah, basically, Hull, they've hit a wobble in form. They want to go to the Elite League, but they're not. I don't think they're going to win enough this season. And their coach is throwing his toys out the pram when they lose games. And therefore, that's a concern for me. Is their coach? He's basically, they've had a few defeats and he's thrown the team under the bus, saying these players are crap, blah 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 blah, not good enough, blah 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 blah, all that kind of stuff, which I don't think helps the team going forward. I don't think it aids the team going forward. So there's that to consider. I'm just checking my data quickly on views and on videos quick. Then there you have the so Hull, we're not sure if they're going to go to the Elite League. Milton Keynes Lightning, we're not sure if they're going to stay in the Elite League for next year because they are struggling this year. Really, they are struggling. And there are calls to bring back the old EPIHL or something similar as the second tier. There are calls to bring back some second tier kind of league above the National League. There was a fan survey done by Banners on the Wall podcast. And I suggest you check Banners on the Wall out. They're really interesting to listen to, and some of their articles they put up are really, really interesting. And I've engaged a lot with them on social media. They did an online survey on what fans felt about the inaugural restructured season last year, and I think 75% would like to see the second tier return in some kind of format, because we're seeing with teams like Invicta, they are struggling financially to ice a team. They've lost both their imports, have gone. I think 5 players that they signed in the summer have gone, including both their imports. So they are basically short benched. So they've got to find replacements for these players. And obviously, Basingstoke have this ongoing issue with the rink and the state of it, and whether it's sustainable to keep playing there. Because they had a meeting over the weekend on Saturday, and basically what came out of it is Planet Ice admitted the rink could fail tomorrow. Planet Ice have withdrawn their withdrawn from operating Basingstoke Rink. A company called New Rivers has come in, and they've said they will refurb and repair. They're prepared to rebuild the rink, and they're prepared to have a deal with Basingstoke to keep them playing there. There's a temporary rink solution that's got to be put in place now, however. So we'll have to see what comes out on the meeting on the 14th with that, because we have to wait to see what comes out of the meeting and what results from it on the 14th. On the actual playing side of things, the games I've seen have been. Oh, that's fine, Rob. That's fine, not a problem. On the playing side of things, Bracknell played very, very well. I think they balanced the team very, very well with the players that were left over from last year that stayed and the players they brought in. It's a very well balanced lineup, and we are rotating 3 imports. So Malinik's playing all the games. You've got some guy with a Finnish name, Stuart Army, who's from Finland, and you've got this Miller guy from Sweden. So he's played in the SHL. So they are rotating 3 imports at the moment. Whether they keep one of those imports long term is another thing. So that's interesting. But the form has been very, very good. We've had, I think, 3 shutouts this season. We haven't had a shutout for nearly a decade. We have 3 in a season. So that says where the team is at. There are still things that I would improve. There are issues, I think, with some silly penalties being given away. So that's something to look at is the discipline side of the team, and avoidable penalties. They are frustrating. We're on the penalty kill a lot, but the penalty kill is looking very, very solid at the moment. So there are some upsides as well. Overall, the concern I have is next year what the league format's going to be, and it's a question that regularly gets asked on the live streams is what the league format's going to be next year. If Hull do go into the Elite League, if Milton Keynes do drop out of the Elite League, if Invicta still have money issues, if Basingstoke still have rink issues, there are calls to bring back the EPIHL and then add a couple of teams from the National League that meet the requirements to play in the second tier. I think Streatham and the Raiders are 2 teams that definitely could. I think they've got enough backing behind them and they're in a good position. Basingstoke, whether they can get a team next year. Cardiff Fire look like they're going to come back into the National Division 1 South after their disastrous season last year. I think, the Bracknell Bees, I think it comes down to a variety of things. And I think British hockey as a whole needs to be looked at on financial viability of teams. Media coverage. We know we've got the free sports now covering, which is good. We know that teams still do stream games on YouTube and things like that and have their YouTube channels, which is also getting people viewing the sport. Sponsorships are important. I think there should be a way, because we've had players on 2-way contracts with the Elite League, but we don't have a set agreement with a Elite League team. It varies from team to team what scouts have scouted players, and so we want to have this player on a two-way contract, like Josh Tetlow last season, Josh Martin this season, Harvey Stead this season. There's a couple of, I think there's another player this season who's been on a two-way as well, I think Painter, who played for Coventry Blaze this season for a few games. So we are getting players called up to the Elite League to play games, and that's had a positive effect as well. I think within the next 5 years, I think Bracknell and Peterborough will be Elite League teams. I think they will. People may not like Painter, but he is physical, and I think he adds that because Gaz is getting old now, and but Painter can fight. He's big, he's physical, he's quick. He may not be the best player, but he plays high energy. He's disciplined. There are occasionally he does get the odd 10-minute misconduct, and that needs to be looked at. Is player discipline. With what happened with Frankie last year, that's had an effect on the team going forward. Yes, Gaz has had a few fights actually. I'll have to double check some of his doings. He's my favourite player because I've actually met him off the ice, and he's really, really nice. He's really, really friendly. He's quite a funny chap to talk to. He's kind of good laugh to talk to. But definitely, the Frankie Backlick situation concerns me greatly. The first suspension definitely deserved. Absolutely, definitely deserved. The second one possibly deserved. Third one, I'm not so sure about. The format, in my eyes, this is an interesting question because a lot of my subscribers are hockey fans of both the Elite League and National League. So, as someone who's followed the sport since the 90s and remembers the Super League days and the British National League days and the EPIHL, so all the professional leagues that we've had since 1996, and the Elite League, the fact that Bracknell have been approached before when the Elite League was in its infancy says that the Elite League does take this team seriously. Bracknell decided to stay in the British National League, for that season when they were approached. So it's interesting to see what's happening going forward. What format I would have? I would definitely have a team in London, because you've had Cardiff, you've had Belfast, Edinburgh's obviously failed, but I would have a team in London. We've seen look at the teams around London. You've got how many teams around London? We've got Streatham, we've got the Raiders. Invictus just in Kent, so it's just outside London, but does draw fans from Southeast London, from like say Catford and places like that. You've obviously got Chelmsford. That's again just outside London. Bracknell's not that far from London. Guildford's not that far from London. Milton Keynes is not that far from London. A lot of the teams in the Elite League now and the National League are based around London. Streatham's actually in London. So there is clearly fans there. There's clearly an appetite there. The O2 has hosted NHL pre-season games before. I am surprised. No, they're just called the Raiders now. They obviously spent their period of time in London in Lee Valley, and they've gone back to Romford now. They've got their new rink, which looks really nice, by the way. They're just called the Raiders for this season. They are not called London or Romford yet. They're trying to work out whether they just call themselves the Raiders, because they've now got links with the London area with Lee Valley, the Lee Valley Lions. They've now got a link there. So that's their sort of club link thing, is they shared a rink for 4 years. They've got some links with the London area now. They're just called the Raiders this season. So how would I format the Elite League? I have no idea. I think the National League doesn't work as a second tier because not all the teams can financially cope. We've seen with Cardiff, we've seen with Invicta, they can't cope financially. We've seen with D-side Dragons, they just couldn't get decent players. The promotion relegation system doesn't work. Guildford have made a good success of the Elite League. They're fourth in the league right now. They're in the Cup quarterfinals or semi-finals, I believe. So Guildford Flames have adapted very well. Milton Keynes Lightning haven't. So I'm not sure if Hull Pirates will be a success in the Elite League. They want to go up there. I think Peterborough and Bracknell have the rink size to go up there. It's whether the rinks are in the right condition to take that next step to the higher level. There's still a bit of work that needs to happen at Bracknell Rink over the next few years for that to be possible. Money's been a big talking point. Financial viability of teams to succeed in the Elite League. So there's a variety of things to look at. But it's an interesting one. I would definitely like to see Bracknell and Peterborough in the Elite League. I'd like to see Hull in the Elite League. But I would also like to see a return of the EPIHL or something similar in format, because that's a good second tier to have. And I would have a link between the Elite League and the second tier, and then the third tier on players on two-way contracts, developmental contracts, like the NHL with the AHL and the ECIHL, ECHL, East Coast Hockey League, because that system seems to work very well. I wouldn't have necessarily a 20-team elite league size. I don't think the sport's ready for that yet. In time, possibly, but travel costs have to be considered because there's a team in Belfast. We're not quite sure what's going to happen with leaving the EU yet, and the legal side of that politically. I don't think midweek games work very well. I remember when the Bracknell Bees used to have Thursday night games and they were really poorly attended, like really low attendance, and the rink operating costs. Most teams don't own their rink, so it's the money side of it. Midweek games, will they draw fans? Will fans be able to go? Because the way the National League's gone with their youth fan drive, getting all these free school tickets given out, I don't think a midweek game would really work. Not yet. Not for all teams, because the Elite League is very North England heavy. I'm not sure if the midweek games would work, and how would you price a midweek game? That's an interesting one, though. But I remember when the EPIHL was in its infancy, we still had midweek games because the league was fully professional at the time, and the attendances were really poor. I used to go to loads of Thursday night games, and there was not many fans there because there'll be league and cup games combined. They looked really empty at times, which isn't great if you're trying to grow a sport. But that's when bases don't have their financial problems and Bracknell about to have their financial issues off the ice. So midweek games, I'm not sure if they work. Well, the Elite League's obviously now had Liam Kirk drafted, so it's now on the radar of European leagues. If a British player has been drafted from the Elite League, that I think is the way, we're going. Is the NHL is now looking at the Elite League, going, it exists, it's there. They have the quality level now to be seen on the higher stage. We've seen obviously the European style Champions League hockey that we've got, and then the lower level Champions Cup, whatever it is. That Nottingham, Sheffield, and Cardiff and Belfast are competitive in that as well. So it is getting pinged on the North American radar. There's a lot of players that have gone over to North America to play in some of the minor leagues, and yes, the men's national side doing very, very, very well as well. So that again raises the profile in the North American market, which is the biggest market. I think Ben O'Connor playing some time in the SHL again has helped, although he keeps moving around a lot with the teams he's playing for. But Liam Kirk getting drafted has put the Elite League on the map. The NHL and then the North American market has taken notice of what's happening over here in Europe more. The level has improved. I think Liam Kirk, was served well with being on a two-way contract with the Steel Dogs, so he was playing different levels and different amounts of ice time. He is one of the smaller players to get drafted out of the last draft. He's playing reasonably well in the Canadian OHL, so it's not all doom and gloom. He's got some decent line mates who've got some good scoring totals, so look for him to improve his points totals. He's starting to pick up more points and assists, and primary assists as well, which is very nice to see. So he's very key in build-up play. Whether he makes it to NHL level is another thing. Whether he plays a game is another thing in the NHL, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets into the ECHL on a permanent basis, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it to the AHL at some point, if he does make it as a call-up to the NHL for Arizona or any other team for that matter. We shall see, but he's classed as an overseas player, so he's on a professional contract, so he's getting paid in the Canadian Hockey League structure, the OHL. I think his ceiling won't be NHL level, but I do think it. Oh yeah, the Perlini brothers. One was born in Guildford, who's now playing for Arizona, and the other one plays for the Great British national side, and I think plays for Sheffield. So the Perlini brothers, one plays for Arizona in their starting lineup. Perlini. You've got two Perlini brothers. The younger one was born in Guildford. His older brother was basically trained in Guildford and has stayed in the UK. The younger brother is now playing for Arizona. That's an interesting one. because technically Pelini could also play for GB. But he's decided to play for Canada. That's interesting. So there is, it is getting highlighted more and more. Arizona seems to have a link with the Elite League, so I wouldn't be surprised if another Elite League player, if he gets into the draft, that Arizona go, right, we'll have him as well. They seem to have a good link with the British game, through Pelini and Kirk. I know, I have the intel as well. It's fine. But so yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona at next year's draft again look at British players, and in future drafts, because they seem to have, Pelini's been brought up there. He knows the hockey. Kirk's obviously played all his hockey in Britain till this point, so they can give valuable intel to the organisation, and aid in that. And it does put the Elite League on the map. I think, yes, the Elite League does need to grow and continue to grow. It's got to be sustainable growth. You were asking how I would structure it. I don't know if 20 teams is too soon. I think it needs to be an even teamed league. It's going to be interesting going forward. What happens? The TV deal is important. But I would definitely, from what I gathered from the survey that I took part in the summer, that a return to a Elite League, EPIL, National League structure is what fans want, and I think that's what's going to happen. But we have to see what happens at the end of this season. We have to see what happens with Hull if they do go into the Elite League. We have to see what happens with Basingstoke and their rink issues, and we also have to see what happens with Invicta and if they can continue to play at second tier level financially. Also, I'd have a link between two-way contracts, between the various league structures. I wouldn't have midweek games as much as we used to. I think that for me wouldn't draw enough fans at this stage. At this stage, it's not saying in the future that I wouldn't have midweek games. We know what the work. Yeah, I would have something. I would have something similar to that. I would have. I would definitely have the Elite League at an even number. I think they want to be about 14 would be about right. 2 17 conferences, North and South. So you could have a Scottish, Northern Ireland, Northern Conference, and then you could have a more southern half of the UK conference. I think that would. I would think that would work rather well. I think the EPIHL, it worked well while it was going until Manchester Phoenix decided to have financial issues and decided to go bust. And I don't think the Elite League realised by taking Guildford and taking Milton Keynes that they were going to cause what they caused. And I think the Elite League is possibly regretting not having a good, solid second tier, which is at a higher standard than the second tier now. I think playing standards last year, you could definitely see a difference between the teams that had come down from the EPIHL with their standard of play and the teams that were in the National League before. There was a massive gap in quality, and that gap is still there with some teams. Some teams like Milton Keynes Thunder and Invicta Dynamos are nowhere close to the top of the division. Streatham and the Raiders have done well because they already had solid teams to begin with. They already had players that had played in the EPIHL that they had managed to snap up the season before. They were aware when Manchester went bust that this was likely to happen, so they got those players speaking on the old phone, going, "Do you want to play for us next season?" So they were more prepared. I think they've got better funding. Long term, I don't. I don't think I would have a mixed. The Elite League would be far superior to the lower leagues. It would be embarrassing. It would be big score lines, and that's not how you develop players. That's not how it works. I think that would be far more damaging. I don't think that would work at all. I think you've got to think logically here with the level of play and the import rule. I do think there will be a return to a separate second tier outside the National League. I think the EPIHL or an equivalent like British National League returns. Yeah, it would be like Manchester United Yeovil, and that's not necessarily a good thing. We're already seeing blowout games in the same league, if you know what I mean. So take Ottawa and Buffalo, for example, very similar size, but we've seen a blowout game. We're seeing a lot of blowout games this season. So again, if you want to see it on a regular basis, go down that route, and that's not necessarily the best way to develop players. We've seen when new teams end, like we saw last year with Cardiff Fire, they were hammered regularly. They regularly got hammered heavily, double-figure goals against. Um, that's not how it should be. They were battered. We saw when Hull first formed as the Pirates, again, double figures against, getting hammered, not close in scoreline. That's an issue you have when you have a new team come in. And if you were to have that cup kind of structure, now you would see some real big score lines that I don't think would aid the development of the lower level players. I don't think I don't know how fun it would be for the other team because they're not testing themselves and they're not developing themselves. It's just a training session that's half-hearted, and I don't think that it doesn't aid anyone. It's not good for anyone. If it's a regular season game between teams in the same league and it's a blowout, that's a different thing because then you're saying they're all playing at the same level and this team really is crap. But to have different tiered ice hockey is not football. It's not rugby union or rugby league. It is a completely different kettle of fish. And I do fear that if that was to be the case, it would be disastrous. It's not in the ice hockey culture to have that kind of cup system. It wouldn't work, and I'm not sure if fans would be happy seeing their team battered 20 points, 20 goals to nil on a daily basis in a cup competition like that. I don't think it would work. Towards the end of the EPIHL days, some of the cup games were against the teams from the National League, and they had to change the rules on import players, and there was massive blowouts of multiple points. I don't think that's the way to go. I think that would be the wrong idea. I still don't think it would be right. I think but that's me. Ice hockey isn't football. It's a different sports culture. It's a different way the sport is organised, and the talent level, it's because the style of game it is that's a big risk to play elite league teams against lower league opposition. The injury risk is there. The fact if it does become a blowout, discipline. We've seen a lot of articles about discipline, and I don't know how useful that would be to play part timers against full professionals. I really don't see how useful that would be. I don't know if it would benefit anyone. But that's my personal opinion. I think it would be a dangerous risk to take. What I would change though is the structure of the league structures. I'll definitely have to have a second tier back separate from the National League. I think there is a definite level of quality gap between those teams that were in the EPIHL and those that weren't. You can see it, and it hasn't closed. And some of these former EPIHL teams are even stronger than they were before. So I think there is a definite two-tier structure in the National League, and I think that's going to come to a head where they do decide to form a separate second tier again. I think it will happen. I think there is a will for it to happen from the fan bases, and I think a large proportion of the teams that were in the EPIHL before. But it all hinges on what Hull decides to do and what happens with Basingstoke and what happens with Invicta, and also what happens with Milton Keynes Lightning in the Elite League. If any one of those teams has issues, it will cause more calls to bring back the second tier. Because the second tier system that we had did work. That's a lot of teams and that's a lot of travel. I think you take the best out of the NHL one and reform an EPIHL, the best out of NIHL 2, and you split into North and South divisions. I think that's the best way to go. There is no way the current format can be sustainable with the talent gap that is clearly there between the better teams and the worst teams, because we're seeing Hull, Telford, the Steel Dogs in the north, massive gap between the rest. We're seeing in the south with Bracknell and Swindon and Peterborough. Basingstoke, not so much. Basingstoke have obviously got those issues, but the top 3 or 4 teams are ex-EPIHL in both Division 1, North and South. And that gap is there because the Invicta, they can't afford players. They're basically broke. Milton Keynes Thunder, concerns about their long-term future because the Lightning get all the funding from Planet Ice and all the game time. And even they're struggling in the Elite League. the fact that we've taken the Guildford Flames out of the EPIHL and they've gone up is leaving a gap there in rivalry, which I think us Bracknell fans we miss. But yeah, Bracknell, Swindon, and Peterborough, Basingstoke to a point with the team they've got, but they're on ice. They're off. Their rink issues are killing them. But there is clearly a gap between the former EPIHL teams and the National League teams. There's still a talent gap. There's still a funding gap, and I don't think it's sustainable long term. I think there are a couple of the National League teams, such as the Raiders and Streatham, that are competitive and are challenging the former EPIHL teams. Not enough of them are close enough. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do bring back that second tier. They take the best out of the National League teams and mix them in with the EPIHL teams that are clearly superior in funding, fan base, skill level, quality level, because there is a gap there, massive gap there. I don't think we've got the playing quality to do that. There just isn't the quality to do that, and there isn't enough money in the game. We already have a salary cap. That's already in place in the Elite League. Most hockeys, there is sort of a cap there. I think it's down to this TV deal is going to be crucial, and what comes out of that. We are seeing highlights on the news, on regional news of games of the National League now. So the Bracknell Bears games are getting on South Day and ITV Meridian. So are Basingstoke games, so are Swindon games. So the news sports highlights are coming on there. Free Sports has the Elite League deal. So Premier Sports, their Free Sports channel, as part of their network, has got the Elite League deal with the highlight show and one live game every 2 weeks and one live European Challenge Cup game every so often as well. So there is a TV deal in place with Free Sports, which is a start. So a media company has signed a TV agreement, and it's a interim agreement. It's going for 3 years, and then they're going to reassess the vibes that we're getting. But from what I'm hearing, the vibes are good. So it looks like they could expand that TV deal to a game a week or a game every night. There's a match night on. I think they're looking to expand the TV coverage, and that's massively important. Massively important. Also, we are seeing in the National League a lot of the match highlights getting on the news. So Bracknell Bees games on the news on Saturday on ITV Meridian. Swindon Wildcats, same again. We're seeing the basic advice that we know about their issues. That's been on local news a lot. Again, making local news broadcasts on the BBC and ITV. So the local news channels, the local news outlets are picking up the game more now, showing match highlights, actual televised match highlights on the news bulletins. So the interest is growing again. Top 5 things. Sort out a more in-depth TV deal that's free to air with Free Sports. Try and show a few more games. Try and also have a highlights package if possible, more easily accessible. I would also look at online streaming. We've seen teams do that, where they have an agreement with an online streaming company for a £5 here or a couple of quid, but using YouTube as a tool. A lot of sports leagues are doing it now. We have seen some of the Elite League and National League teams have streamed their games live onto YouTube or post their highlights on YouTube. So they are using the social media side of things. So there's that. I would like to see that. I wouldn't say there's a top 5 things. I'll say there's a list of things. Definitely look at financial structures in place, and the governance needs to be seriously looked at, though, and the league structures. So that's basically it. I would say the development of players is there. There are kids playing the game. There are kids watching the game. There's families watching the game. Crowds are up. So we know people are supporting the sport. So that's not an issue. So the support is there. I think Liam Kirk getting drafted and Ben O'Connor playing in the SHL, we know the quality level is improving. So that's okay. So youth development isn't a problem. No, YouTube is the way to go. It's more viewers. We know that British ice hockey has been picked up by North American YouTubers. There's a big Twitter presence of the teams, massive Twitter presence of the teams on Twitter. I follow a lot of the elite and National League teams on Twitter. So there's a lot of social media networking being done by the teams and players. Massive amount of players on Twitter. So I follow a lot of them and keep up to date with a lot of the hockey news in the UK on Twitter. So social media is a big tool that's being used, and Liam Kirk getting drafted blew up the internet, and that created the sudden interest in the Elite League because of Liam Kirk getting drafted by the Arizona Coyotes. Because a player getting drafted by an NHL team from the UK, not just Arizona fans, but fans from all over the NHL are like, who is this kid? And they're looking, and they're going on YouTube, they're finding his highlight reels, they're looking at his Elite League stats, they're looking at his EPIHL stats when he played for the Steel Dogs, they're looking at if he has played, and they're looking at what he's done in the English game against men. When he's played in the Elite League, he's played against former NHL players, so he can play against high level professionals. And suddenly, out of nowhere, he blew up the internet for a month. There is still an interest in not just Liam Kirk but British ice hockey because of that. So as long as that keeps happening, I also have heard rumours there's a couple of these young players in the youth systems or in systems of national and elite league teams that are being looked at as possible future drafts in the next 5 years. So the two-way contract thing between elite league and the second tier is important. So we have to look at getting a proper second tier where there are players on two-way contracts. We have to look at possibly expanding the elite league. So you look at teams like Peterborough and Bracknell and Hull, and seriously consider, and possibly Sheffield as well, not Sheffield, Swindon, and look at getting them, possibly to expand the elite league, because it does put a team in the Midlands, another team in the south, and another team in the north of England. So that does sort of balance out the English side of the elite league. If you get the elite league to 11 to 14 teams, that's two divisions of 7. That works pretty well. So the northern half, so Northern Ireland, Scotland, north of England covers a division, and southern England and Cardiff cover a division. That would work brilliantly. It's whether the financial side of it, and this is another, the financial side of British ice hockey is something that needs to be looked at, and the structures financially and the governance. Also, refereeing needs to improve. Officiating, as the game is growing, which is great, and the quality level of play is up. I will admit that at both levels. Officiating needs to catch up, and it's not caught up enough yet. And there is an issue with getting enough trained officials, because I've noticed that the Elite League and the NIHL, so the National League and the British Ice Hockey in general, has advertised refereeing courses. So they're trying to improve the talent pool for officials. I don't know how you would work out the division side of things. Maybe 2 home, 2 away, and 1 home, 1 away for the divisions like that. You've got to be able to keep the league schedule balanced, and make sure, however you work it out, travel is going to be interesting, because it's got, obviously, Belfast, you either get the ferry or you fly. So travel costs will have to be considered when looking at fixture list. Yeah, running costs have to be looked at. This is why Invicta have hit a brick wall in the last few weeks. So operating costs have to be looked at, and profit margins have to be looked at, and making the sport sustainable long term. That's the important thing, is looking at keeping things sustainable. If you can't keep things sustainable, then it falls flat, and it will struggle again. So we have to, sustainability is really, really important. Really, really important to make sure that the league is financially viable, can keep developing the players, it's a difficult one, because I do feel that the money side of it has been an issue for a while. Obviously, when I was younger, watching the sport, you don't realise, the money side of it, how important that actually is, and how important stable financing is to the sport. But as we get older and things like that, the money side of it and the financial structures in place are exceptionally important. Um, so the TV deal helps with that. I think that will aid more sponsors to get involved in sponsoring. I've noticed there's more sponsorship boards at Bracknell now. The advertising hoardings, there's more sponsorship going up around the rink on the boards. So they've worked out for whatever reason there seems to be more sponsors on board, which is important. Um, and where the sponsorship boards are located as well, really, really crucial. So when you come in the front entrance, there's loads of sponsorship on that far side, and where they stream the games from and film the games from, again, lots of sponsorship in the corners. It's very visible. It's there. There's new scoreboards up. There's netting up now. So the future is bright for Bracknell. I don't know about other teams. Basingstoke, we find out on the 14th what the plan is in 7 days for the future of the team with where they're going to be playing their games, temporary rink, if they're going to have to move, merge, relocate, a whole variety of things. I have noticed a lot of Bracknell, Basingstoke fans at Bracknell games. So the longevity of the Bison is important. It's a talking point. Oh well, this is interesting. The Pacific Division's had a real poor start overall. Arizona's had a really good start, and they went on that 5-game winning streak. So that's important that Arizona are healthy. Anaheim and LA are really, really all over the clock at the moment. Vegas, second season syndrome. They've taken a little step back. I think they possibly severely overachieved last year. But they are showing a few signs by nicking the odd game here or there. They just need to go on a winning run. They are, I think, flirting with wildcard status this year. So they could be going under the radar a little bit. Vancouver have had an amazing start. So teams that were expected to struggle are doing well, and teams that are going to do well are struggling. It's weird. The Pacific's turned on its head. Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Arizona all having really good starts, and they were all expected to possibly struggle, apart from maybe Edmonton. And the teams that were expected to do well, apart from San Jose, so Vegas, LA, and Anaheim, all struggling, really on poor form right now. So I think the Pacific Division is one of those divisions that's all up in the air at the moment. It's turned on its head. Now, whether the teams at the top of the division can maintain, like Vancouver, can they maintain this form? Because they weren't expected to be a playoff team. Can Arizona, continue to grow? And I think LA are the ones in the most serious trouble. I think they're old, they're slow. Kovalchuk, okay, yeah, he's a point of game guy. It's not a problem, but he's not the solution. I think LA have times caught up with an aging squad there. I think Anaheim injuries are causing their problems. San Jose are hit and miss. Carlson hasn't started scoring yet, so he scored assists. He hasn't scored goals yet, so that's interesting to see how Erik Karlsson can start getting the puck in the net and doing what he did 2 years ago. That's what we've got to see from him. Vegas is an interesting one. I think because they played so well in their first year, you've got to expect some kind of regression, but they're not quite firing on all cylinders yet. I think the Nate Schmidt suspension has had something to do with that. Fleury and Subban haven't put up the numbers they did last year, but they're not injured this year, so there's not that kind of we have to play for the goalie. Pacioretty, is he gelling? Is Stasny, he's out injured at the moment? Is he gelling with the squad? I don't think it's all doom and gloom at Vegas. I think it's being overhyped by some, but they have definitely slipped back a little bit. But the whole Pacific as a division is all up all over the place at the moment. So to really get an accurate read of where teams are is difficult with Vancouver and Arizona having better than expected starts, Edmonton being up there, Calgary, being up there. Those 4 teams look like the playoff teams in the Pacific at the moment. So I don't know. It's LA, I think, will miss the playoffs this year. Anaheim may miss the playoffs this year. I think injuries are catching up with Anaheim, and LA age has caught up with them, and not strengthening enough over the last couple of years. And they've now started to have a coach turnover every couple of seasons now. So Daryl Sutter's gone. They've sacked Stevens. I don't know. It's interesting because obviously I follow the Central Division mostly. I think the Central Division is the hardest division in hockey. It's the most brutal in hockey, and we've got the least teams for now. I think the Central is the toughest division. I think the Atlantic division, the Eastern Conference divisions, they're pretty weak as well. There's the gap between top and bottom in those divisions is like that. The Central is the toughest division, and that's my personal view. I think the Central is the toughest division. In the regular season, at least playoffs, I don't know. It's interesting. I think it's going to be a very, very, very crazy year this year in the NHL. There's a lot happening. It's all up in the air a little bit. It's going to be a very unpredictable season. Of that, I can have no doubt. I don't know who's going to make the Stanley Cup final now. I don't know who's going to make the playoffs now. Looking very unpredictable. But there are teams struggling that I'm surprised are struggling, and there are some teams that I'm surprised are doing as well as they are. So, if we're looking at form, this is why I don't predict anything. Because you look where Colorado were 2 years ago, and look where they last year, and look where they are now. Same with New Jersey. Florida getting so close last year, and look at their start this season has not been great. Arizona, look what they did to Tampa, and look at some of the big wins they've had, which last year they were losing by that scoreline. So some teams have really turned things around. Other teams have hit this in different form. But we're only in the end of the first month. We're only in the first week of November. I would say have a look at the standings by end of November, beginning of December, and then we'll get a better idea of where teams are at. I think teams like Ottawa will fall back. I think Toronto are overhyped and aren't as good as people make out they are. Their home form isn't good enough. Their home form is atrocious compared to their away form. And I think they're not necessarily as good as people think they are. I think they're overrated. But that's the Canadian media for you. I think the Central and Western Canadian sides look stronger than the Eastern Canadian sides. I think Montreal are having a surprising season. Whether they can keep that up, I don't know. I really don't know if Montreal can keep that up. I don't think they have that star player scoring. They don't have a star scorer. They don't have the ultimate star player. They have some good players. They haven't got a superstar player in Montreal, so that could be a problem going forward for them. But honestly, I couldn't really tell you. I think we're only a month into the season. Give it 2.5 months into the season, then we can have a proper debate about who's a playoff team and who's going to be trying to get Jack Hughes in the draft. It's far too early to start tanking now. I hate tanking. I think there needs to be rules in place to stop teams deliberately losing or playing badly to try and get a better draft pick. This is why I think the draft system the draft lottery needs to be made a pure lottery to stop teams deliberately losing and make teams play to their ability. I noticed we've already had 2 coaches sacked. Yeah, I'll message you on Facebook, but I'm not on Facebook much at the moment. But I'm more than happy to get hold of you and see what we can do. There's a game this Saturday, so if you want to come to the game Saturday, I'm more than happy to go with you. It'd be nice to catch up and discuss all things hockey. So yeah, it'd be good to see you on Saturday if you want. But no, thanks for being in the live stream. We've discussed a lot of hockey stuff. I don't normally go into this much depth on one sport in a live stream, but hey, man, I appreciate haven't seen you for a while. Be nice to catch up with you at a game, have a beer. It's been a while. I'm planning to do some subscriber meetups as well. So if you're up for that, because you've got a car, you could help with transportation. Because I've got some subscribers in Swindon and in Basingstoke and around the southeast. So it'd be kind of cool to have a little get together with subscribers and literally sit down and discuss hockey or discuss football or discuss cricket or whatever sport it is. Maybe have a little 5-a-side kickabout or something. That'd be kind of fun. That's something we could plan. And it'd be kind of cool to get you possibly into a video, a podcast episode. Because I get my mate Sam. He's a Rangers fan. You're an Ottawa fan. I'm a Winnipeg fan. That's going to be really, really interesting. If we could have the 3 of us on a podcast, doing an NHL podcast, because that'd be really interesting. Because we're all hockey fans, so that'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I'll catch you around, man. Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Good to see you. We'll have to catch up soon. I'll message you on Facebook, and yeah, we'll have a get together at some point. There's obviously a game Saturday, so if you're up for Saturday's game, that'd be cool. Kind of cool to see you. And we could have a bit of banter. If not, yeah, we shall see when we catch up. I'll see you soon, bud. Right, I'm going to end that there. So cheers for everyone's input. I know there was not a lot of input on this stream today, but it's what it is. I appreciate Rob getting in contact. I haven't seen him for a while. And yeah, I'll have some more videos for you guys soon. Stream. Not great, but well.